We're ready.
Okay, you all set, Megan?
Yep, recording.
Okay.
All right, we'll do that again all over. Pretend I didn't say that. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming to the Artist Talk this afternoon with Tom Roese. I can't wait. I hope you've enjoyed the our portion of the CONVERGE exhibition. It's the largest exhibition Artist Archive has ever done. It's in 5 venues. It's here, it's at the Artist Archive, it's at Lake Erie College, Metro Health, and the LGBT Center on Detroit Avenue. The portion we saw at the archive at the opening reception was amazing, just amazing, some absolutely stunning work. And I have always been fascinated since I first saw the first piece of Tom Roese's work. I'm just blown away by it and can't wait to hear him talk about it. And I'm going to introduce Kelly Pontoni, who conceptualized and curated this amazing collection called CONVERGE, and she will introduce Tom. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Before we get to the man of the hour, I'm going to let our director, Mindy Towsley, talk a little bit.
Thanks, Kelly. Welcome, everyone. We're really looking forward to this talk with Tom Roese. I'd just like to thank some of the sponsors who helped the archives and have helped CONVERGE. The Ohio Arts Council gave us an Arts Next grant to help us fund CONVERGE. I'd also like to thank Cuyahoga Arts and Culture, the David E. Davis Foundation, the Gunn Foundation, as well as the many individual supporters who have made this exhibition in particular a viable one for us. Our members at the archive are very important to us, and I'd like to put a shout out to all the members who are joining us here today too. So thanks so much. And I'm going to turn it back to Kelly and she can introduce Tom. Oh, actually, you know what? Before we do that, I want to turn it over to Megan. Megan's going to tell you a little bit about the programming that is happening at the different venues for CONVERGE. I know Mark mentioned the different site venues, so she can go over some of the programming with you guys, so you can join us for some of that. And also, I think she's going to just do a little bit of housekeeping and just remind everybody how to use Zoom. Thanks so much.
Okay. See if it takes it over with active speaker. Almost. Hold on 1 second, everyone. Sorry for that delay. Am I on active speaker? Can you see me, Mindy? Okay, wonderful. So hi, everyone. Welcome to our program today. So you're all very familiar with Zoom, but I'll give you a little bit of the ins and outs of our program. And as you can see, I'm on a laptop, so sorry for the bizarre angles that you see before you. So the way that we're going to run the program today is that after Tom presents, there will be a Q&A function. The Q&A will be live at Judson. All the wonderful individuals that are watching the program live at Judson Manor, residents only for this one, will be actually able to ask questions. And then you will be able to ask questions as well out there in Zoom land. We just ask that you put them in the Q&A, which is the little chat bubbles down there at the bottom of the screen. Type it in there and we'll ask those at the end. And then I also wanted to go over just a couple of cool programs that we have coming up for CONVERGE. There we are. So with CONVERGE, we got a big full schedule of stuff coming up. After this program, our next one is going to be Unmasking Drag History with the Dr. Lady J. So that's going to be talking about the role of cisgendered women, non-binary folks, and transgendered people and their pivotal role in founding the art form we now know as drag. That is going to be on September 14th. That's virtual, 7 to 8:15 p.m. And you can register on artistarchives.org. The next program we have after that is actually a collaborative program, and it's actually with MoCA. MoCA right now has the Access Mundo exhibition up that is looking at the queer Chicano networks of LA. So as part of their presentation and ours, we are having an AIDS story sharing workshop called Our AIDS Story. That's a 2-part one, and it will be held on September 25th at the Artist Archives, featuring some highlighted CONVERGE artists as featured storytellers. And then there will be a second part on December 1st, which is World AIDS Day, and that will be at MoCA. You'll be able to register for both of those shortly on Artist Archives, probably actually next week, you'll be able to sign up. And then we also have a huge program for the AEWR. It is the Art and AIDS panel discussion. So that's going to be featuring Carmen Lane, who's an exhibiting artist at CONVERGE. That's Daniel Marcus, who is was a co-curator for Art After Stonewall, an amazing exhibition. Gil Kudrin, an exhibiting artist, who's also the longest surviving patient with HIV/AIDS. And then it will be moderated by Kelly Pontoni's very own partner, very own wife, Martha Pontoni, who is a foundational advocate for LGBTQ life and artwork in Cleveland. So that will be discussing the relationship of art and AIDS. Registration link for that one coming soon as well. And then finally, yeah, we're busy, we told you, is going to be a Joyce Mora Jones is hosting a doll making workshop that is actually going to help people participating to tell their own LGBTQ story. That's going to be held at the Archives at the very, very end of the show. So that's Saturday, October 16th, Sunday, October 17th, and there'll be more information available on artistarchives.org. So I think I got them all. So without further ado, I will be throwing it back over to Mindy, if I'm correct. Yes.
Sure, I'll take it.
There we go. Why not?
Okay, thanks, Megan.
Well,
Yeah, it's a very full schedule of programming. We hope you guys will come and join us for some of that. And now I'd like to introduce Kelly Pontoni, who is the Chief Curator for CONVERGE. Kelly did have help curating CONVERGE from Tony Williams, Mark Yasinchek, and Sam Butler, who were our other CONVERGE curators. We made sure that we had a nice age range in CONVERGE curators, as well as gender identification and race. And so it's a great exhibition. And Kelly, if you'd like to take it away, I'm going to stop my video and mute myself.
Great, thank you. And thank you everyone here at Judson. I know that was a lot to listen to. That's what happens when we have these hybrid events. This way a lot of people can hear Tom's presentation and be on Zoom. So thank you again, Mark, and everyone here at Judson for allowing us to have these shows here. CONVERGE at the Archives and all the other venues opened last Thursday. It was very, very successful, I think. And probably the best thing is to look on the Archives website for all of those different programs. There's a lot of Zoom events that you can tune in, and Megan's done an amazing job with the website. So if you go to artistarchives.org, you can hear and see all, you can see all the programming. So I want to introduce Tom Roese. He is an archived artist. And we have his work here at Judson, and we also have his work up at the LGBT Center in Greater Cleveland. That's on Detroit and Gordon Square. So if you wanted to take a ride, we have tons of art in the center down there. So he has a couple pieces. And so I'm very excited about this talk. I think I can listen to Tom all the time talk about his work. And I'm sure everyone here at Judson has seen the pieces that he has in the gallery here. So without anything more, I'll give you Tom Roese.
Thank you, Kelly. Bear with me for a minute until I turn on my equipment. Hopefully it works. And while I'm trying to do that and multitask, thank you so much to the Artist Archives of the Western Reserve and the whole staff and all the volunteers and everything. As you heard, this is a huge undertaking for them. And to get, 70 artists, 71 artists to follow deadlines, it's like herding cats. Artists don't read emails or follow directions very well. So that is amazing that they stuck with all of us through that. So thanks to the Artist Archives and to the head of the curatorial staff, Kelly, and also thank you to Judson Manor for hosting one of the venues and this talk. And I'd also like to thoroughly embarrass my husband. Thank you so much for all your support. My husband, Bill Franklin, by the way. I get teary-eyed just thinking about it. Next slide, please. Hey, we're looking at a drawing, and a lot of the work that we're seeing today that I'm going to show you is prior to the pandemic, and quite a bit of it is during the pandemic as well. This one's prior to. Anyway, I wanted to show this one as an example of a drawing. Yes, it looks very realistic and naturalistic, basically, when you first look at it. But when I look at it, it's obvious to me that it's a drawing. Why? Because it doesn't have as many fine details, real minute details. It just doesn't have the same quality as a photograph. When I do a drawing, I do work from photographic reference, but I change a lot. I move things around, I change colors, and so on. And when I do a drawing, each drawing basically is a short story. Next slide, please. So here's one of the photographs that I might use for a reference for a drawing. And I hope you can see a bit of a difference. This is a lot more noisy in terms of having a lot of texture to it. My drawings, I feel, are a little bit more surreal in comparison. They're real, but there's an atmosphere about them that's a little less than real, perhaps, is one way to put it. If I were to do this as a drawing, the changes I would make just off the top of my head would be to slide the house on the left into the center just a little bit more. I would take the tree trunk that's right next to it, move that the same distance in, I think. I would also put siding on the house on the left, and I would change its color, perhaps to a creamy yellow. I'm not sure until I would start doing the drawing. I would also reduce the corner foliage so that it wouldn't be quite as hiding. Next slide, please. Okay, this is obviously a drawing again. I look at it and I think it's obviously a drawing. So when is a drawing? Not a photograph, it's when it's a drawing. Again, I'm interpreting, I'm not recording. So I look at a scene and I make adjustments. And I start thinking in terms of what kind of a short story could it be? What's it about? Sometimes the elements in the drawing represent characters in a story. Sometimes the story is sort of maybe the backstory that you're seeing visually, and sometimes that's supported by the title. So those are some clues that we'll talk about in a little bit. Next slide, please. I thought it would be fun to start with a piece from high school. And so this is 18 by 24 in ink, and I marvel at it because I taught high school for 30 years, and I can't believe I have those little flickering edges in the sky, and then I put washes on the building on the right. I think that's pretty sophisticated for a high school student. I can only suggest that probably my high school teacher told me to do that. Other than that, I look at this and go, I can't believe I did that. That's really pretty cool for a kid. But the takeaway from high school was, I wanted to do that forever. I want this to be my career. Next slide, please. And then we jump a bit to the University of Northern Colorado, where I got my master's degree. This drawing is 18 by 24 inches. It's a graphite drawing. And the whole concept of my graduate thesis was tourist traps of the West. And so I had to put on a gallery exhibition, and I manipulated how you viewed each drawing so that there would be focal points that I forced you to look at. In this case, it's the Jeep and the mountains, comparing those two, bringing those two elements together. Whereas the building that says breakfast served all day is there, you're aware of it, but it's more peripheral because I chose to make the values a lot less intensified. Next slide, please. And another one from that series, 18 by 24 inches. And again, it's the vehicle relating to the mountains. And I think because I always have this under level of dark humor, do not enter in wrong way. So you go out west to visit the mountains and hike and so forth, but according to that sign, you're not allowed to go there. So I think that's kind of fun. Next slide, please. About the mid-90s, I decided to spend some money and buy a second house that I would dedicate to use as a studio. It's about 5 minutes away, and the entire house is basically trashed because it's covered with paint everywhere, but that's a whole nother story. There will have to be some renovations before we put it on the market. But you can see where I work. It's a huge drafting table with a drafting machine on it. Next slide, please. If I turn to the left, there's a conference area where we meet museum curators and collectors and clients. And next slide, please. If I look to the right, I get a view of nature. In fact, just yesterday, I happened to look over there and a deer walked by. And I thought, get away from here, deer, because they eat everything. Next slide, please. Right to the immediate left of my drafting table is my sort of a planning desk where I throw everything. If I think of something I want to draw or something I want to change, I write it on a note and it gets thrown on that stack right there. And if you look real carefully, right in the center is the photographic reference for that one drawing that we've already looked at. So anyway, that table represents the chaos that's in my head on any given day. Bill can attest to this, that when I talk, I don't always make sense because it's like a stream of consciousness that goes on forever and he's saying, shut up already. But that's what's in my head. And I do drawings to organize all that chaos. Next slide, please. There's a wet bar on the side of the grand room of this house, and that's my paint mixing area. And again, it represents the chaos in my head. Paint is everywhere. That's definitely an area that will have to be renovated when we go to put it on the market. Next slide, please. The traditional color wheel. So we're going to do some 101 basics on how to make art. So the first thing is we're going to learn how I use color. The color wheel has three primers: yellow, red, and yellow, red, and blue. And from those three colors, all the rest of the colors theoretically can be made. So my rule is every color I use, I have to adjust three ways. So I'll change its value. So let's just look at yellow. The easiest way to change value, add some white to it, it lightens it. That's changed its value. I also want to make it less intense. So I want to take some of that brilliant yellow out of there. So if I add the opposite, which is violet, they call it purple here, I would never call it purple. Anyway, violet, add a touch of violet to the yellow, it'll make it less harsh and less yellow. So I've changed it two ways. And then if I add a little bit of orange to it or green, I'm changing the temperature as well. So each color has to be changed three ways. That's my rule. Next slide, please. Whoa, I lost my program. Okay, next slide, please. That's the one, yeah. This is like Sherwin-Williams paint chips. Every color I make, I test to see if it's the right value, the right temperature, the right everything. And you can see, again, there are a lot of tests that need to be made before the final decision is made. Speaking of Sherwin-Williams, that is a bit of a problem because you've got this tiny little chip of color and you're painting a 40-inch drawing. So it's like when you choose color for your living room wall and then you start to paint the whole wall, you go, oh, what have I done? Anyway, next slide, please. Then I test the color or the paint for opacity. You can see little squiggly lines there in pencil. By putting a brush stroke over that, I can see how much of that pencil shows through. I pretty much want my color to be pretty transparent because it is a drawing, first of all, that has been colorized to make it simple. Next slide, please. Okay, composition 101. The rules of composition. Now, it's art. There shouldn't be any rules. Hello. But if you're doing creative writing or music or whatever, there's basic things that you should consider perhaps before you proceed to develop something that's very creative. So the first rule is don't divide your page in half in any one direction, diagonally, horizontally, or vertically. And if you look at all my drawings, I pretty much break that rule each time. I try to. I go out of my way to break that rule. Next slide, please. Don't put the interest point right in the center. So here I'm dividing the page in half horizontally and I'm dividing it vertically. Now I wouldn't do that because that's a pretty bad composition, but you'll see in some of my drawings a way that I can sneak around that. Next slide, please. I'm dividing the page in half vertically with the tree, and without thinking, this is what a typical person would do, without thinking, the amount of space at the top equals the grass at the bottom. We, as humans, organize ourselves visually. I didn't think about doing that, but it came out that way. So I'm dividing it vertically, and I'm running something along the bottom edge. Don't do that either. Next slide, please. Now, I try to do this all the time, too. What can I put on all the edges? Here I've got wires at the top, the utility poles on the sides, and grass at the bottom. It's forming a frame. It's containing the image. You can't get out, you can't get in, but I'll break that rule as many times as I can get away with. Next slide, please. Here I'm dividing the page diagonally, and the point of interest is right in the center. Now here it helps because there's an indication or an appearance, a suggestion of motion and energy. So that helps a lot, but it's still a pretty bad composition. Next slide, please. Teaching my 9th, 10th, and 11th, and 12th graders, typically I'd say, let's do this. Divide the page in thirds in both directions and put a point of interest on one of the intersections. And that's a nice generic way to do a composition that is going to give you a pretty successful composition. So if we think of that one with the boat, if we had the boat where the star is, that would be so much better than that other thing I showed you. Next slide, please. During about 2010, I was doing drawings like these two. These are both 29 by 22 inches, so fairly large, but not humongously big. And you can see that they are graphite, very black and white, all done with pencil. If you think about the show that's out in the corridor, there's a couple paintings on canvas. I was doing those right before these. And I liked painting. I liked the color a lot. What I didn't like was not being able to draw so much. So I kept fussing with myself, how can I go about getting back to drawing and still incorporate color? So the beginnings of that was a little tenuous. I'm real lazy. If you look at the drawing on the right, the house on the right is the color of my paper. That gray is the color of the paper. So I learned early on, I don't have to shade that. It's already there, the color's already there. And if you look inside of everything, the grayness that's there is the color of the paper. The color is white acrylic for the snow and a very pale blue for the sky. Nice, but I wanted more color. After painting, I liked color. Oh, I wanted to say too, the only thing I liked about painting was stretching the canvas. Getting down on the floor and stretching, I love stretching the canvas. Next slide, please. In 2010, March and April, I was offered a residency fellowship at the Ballinglen Arts Foundation in Ballycastle, County Mayo in Ireland. And so here's a map of Ireland, and if we look along the left edge, about 2/3 of the way up, that great big light green area, that's County Mayo. And if you look at that little notch between Mayo and Sligo, the sort of blue-violety one, that notch is about where Ballycastle was. Next slide, please. Oh, I lost it again. Hang on. Technology and I don't get along. Like I said earlier, all I know is how to sharpen a pencil. Okay, here is County Mayo, and you can see right at the top along the edge, right about in the middle, is Ballycastle. And the purpose for going there was they wanted us to focus all day long on just making art. No distractions, no club meetings, no nothing. Just go to work and work every day. And next slide, please. That's downtown Ballycastle during the rush hour. And that's the only road in Ballycastle. So there wasn't anything to do except go to our studio every day and work. Next slide, please. And this is the Ballinglen Arts Foundation. The green building on the left is the gallery. The tan building just to the right of that is on the first floor of the library, and on the second floor some studios. That little window was my studio. The blue building was administrative offices on the first floor in a beautiful print studio. And upstairs were other studios. And then the white building, they finished about when the pandemic was starting, and that's the Ballinglen Arts Museum. So the only payment that they accepted was that they would select work to keep in their archives that you did in Ireland. And they selected 2 of mine, and then when they built the museum, the archives went to the permanent collection of the museum. So now I'm in a museum in Ireland, which I think is pretty cool. Next slide is an example of one of the studios. It's not mine, but you can see that lots of skylights. It was terrific. Next slide. They gave us each a private house to live in, which I would live permanently. It was a lovely house, just beautiful. And we could walk right into town and to work, so that was perfect. Next slide, please. This is my studio, and one of the other things that we would do is when students from the county would come in on field trips, they would ask, could the students come up to your studio and ask questions about what it's like to be an artist and, you know, what you're doing here, what have you learned, blah, blah, blah. And that was great fun. The lady in yellow is Una Ford. She was the director of the foundation, is the director of the foundation. And the guy in the middle and the back was their classroom teacher. Next slide, please. Again, it's the same as here. You give a teacher a mic, you can't get them to shut up. So those kids came into my studio, they had to hear every detail and how I sharpen a pencil. Next slide, please. And some of the questions were so animated, I wish I could remember what this kid was asking, but how could you not enjoy that moment? Next slide, please. If this kid had a checkbook, he would have bought art, I think, but I just love it. Next slide, please. My takeaway from being in Ireland was I had time to work and to think, so I was transforming my graphite drawings into graphite drawings that had paint on them. So I was experimenting very timidly at first with putting little bits of color. I mean, it was all paint went on everything, but it wasn't a lot of color in the paint. And so I experimented more and more with putting these washes of acrylic paint over the graphite drawing. Next slide, please. These two drawings are kind of a hybrid. I'm still kind of, you know, running around like the chicken in the hen house going, I'm too chicken to do this. To put paint on my drawing, it's a little scary. So these, you can see the yellow ochre house, the whole roof is graphite and the street is graphite. The other one, I think, around the windows and things are graphite as well. But there is more color, there is more paint, and a little bit more intense paint, a little bit more stronger color. So I'm getting a little bit more gutsy with it. Next slide, please. We'll jump ahead now. This is during the pandemic. This is what my current work looks like. A lot more color. I'm not nearly as afraid about applying color. This one's 29 by 22, and again, I tell you that the titles often can give you a clue as to what's happening. Each of my drawings is a short story. This one is called Cle Series Spring Driveway, and the idea here is during the pandemic, we were looking forward to that first spring, and I think of this in terms of people cutting grass for the first time, weeding, setting things out in their garden, and potentially having the opportunity to talk to their neighbor across the driveway. Next slide, please. Each drawing I have, I'm jumping ahead, hang on. Okay, yes, that's the right slide. This is how the drawing starts. It's just a very graphite, simple outline drawing on the left. I know they're really hard to see, but it's hard to photograph when it's just the pencil line like that. The center one is upside down. The iPad and the iPhone in the studio are phenomenal. I can take pictures nonstop while I'm working, and if I rotate the picture upside down, I can get a better feeling for how things are working, if they're drawn correctly, or how the balance is working, and so on. So it's upside down for a purpose. It's to study the shapes. Each of my drawings is realistic, but the bones are extremely abstract. And then the drawing on the right is an example of how I change things as I go. There's 4 windows in a row. I kept them 4 windows in a row, but I decided I didn't like that placement. So the middle windows, I think, got real close and got paired up. Next slide, please. So on the left is a lot more information is being put in. It's just outline at this point. And I would say that if you get 3 big shapes in the right place, in the right proportion, in the right perspective, then you can start breaking down all the other shapes for the rest of the drawing. So it's important to get 3 things at least, the right place. And so that's the important part, jockey that part around, and then the drawing starts to fall into place as you work on sections of it. In the center, you can see how I did move those windows around. And then on the right, there's some shading started. Sometimes I do use colored pencil, mostly white, like in the clouds, and I put a wash of blue colored pencil at the top because I wanted the sky to be a little richer. Next slide, please. Again, all these are examples of the drawing getting more and more developed as a graphite drawing before I start applying color. I want to focus on the one on the right and look at the driveway and how textured that is. So as I've gotten older, one of my goals was to, I don't care anymore. So I started shading more recklessly than I used to. I used to worship each edge and that sort of thing. And now my drawings are much more like that driveway, and I'm really having a lot more fun doing that. Next slide, please. These three just are examples of how the paint gets a little bit more developed, and the paint is being applied in each of the prescribed areas. Next slide, please. Each drawing, before I start, I analyze it, and it has to fulfill three requirements. Requirement number one, is it a technical challenge? Is it going to be scary to work on? There's no point in doing doing any drawing if it's not going to be a challenge or difficult. Why would I do something that's really easy? Boring. So I look at something that's going to give me a challenge or a big risk. The mantra in the studio is, it's just a piece of paper. So if I take a big risk and things aren't working really well, it's just a piece of paper. And they invented the eraser. So I can make adjustments as I go. Next, next thing I would consider is it a short story? Is there a compelling story? Will it be about something? And sometimes then I start to develop the title. Sometimes the title comes as I'm working on it. But can the title support the narrative of what is happening in the visual? And the final thing would be, is there some little thing that's going to keep me interested? Or like I said earlier, I have this layer of dark humor. Is there something that I'm going to think is really funny? And everybody's going to look at it in this big serious drawing, and I look at it, and there's that one little funny thing there that's driving everybody crazy. Next slide, please. So on this drawing, let's break it down again. The technical challenge were the clouds. How to get clouds to look like they're floating in the sky and they're paint. Now, I don't normally do clouds, so for me this was a big deal to have to try to do those clouds. Next thing, please. Next slide. And the story was about these neighbors getting along, as I alluded to earlier. It's the pandemic. It was during the pandemic, but it was spring. It's bright and sunny. We might have a chance to call out to our neighbor and share some ideas. These houses are right tight against each other. They have to get along. They've been there for years and years and years and years, and they get along. Can we get along too? That's an allusion to our neighbor. That's another story. Anyhow, the next slide is the little thing that intrigues me. I had to do those little rocks. The contrast from the mulch to the grass to the rocks, and each rock was different. I just had to do those rocks. How could you not do this drawing and put those rocks in? Next slide, please. Cle Series steel forest, 16 by 40. So it's almost 4 feet long. And let's break this down into the three things again as well. Difficulty and challenge, story, and personal element of interest. Next slide, please. And next slide, please. Sorry about that. And the challenge was steel spaghetti, all of that stuff going on. How could I find my way? Again, you find three big things and then break it down and break it down and break it down, and before you know it, you're done. In this case, I would sometimes label parts, A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, or lightly shade things to find my way. Otherwise, you're like totally lost. Next slide, please. Story and content. This one was about race relationships. There's a light-colored building a bridge next to a dark-colored bridge, and in reality, they're down in the flats. They're right next to each other. They're only a few feet apart. They've been there for decades. They get along, as far as I know. It doesn't matter what color they are. Their DNA is they're a bridge. One takes trains across, the other one takes cars across, but they get along, and they're just doing their job. Can't we try to do that? Next slide, please. And the one little thing that was going to amuse me, those little orange banners. How could you not do the orange banner? Anyway, that's just personal. Next slide, please. This one is Cle Series split integrity, 40 inches by 32, so it's almost 4 feet by 3 feet. It's very large. Break it down again. Next slide, please. And the challenge was how to get this big thing and be centered. Remember that Composition 101? Look at what I'm breaking here, all the rules. Next slide, please. The content was about that little slice of air. Between those great big heavy steel things that hold this train across this valley are these slivers of air. That's my story right there. I'm sorry, air is holding that bridge together. Next slide. What's going to amuse me or what's interesting to me, those cast shadows of light and dark. Such wonderful abstract patterns around that entire bridge. Next slide, please. Recent drawings. Okay, next slide, please. Oh, good. What to look for. Now here's where you're gonna have to do some work. I'm gonna ask you to start thinking more about what you're looking at. Wouldn't it be fun if I made you get out pencil and paper and we actually had a quiz on this? But what could you consider? Here's a list of potential things. So kind of keep these things in mind when we start looking at the next 10 drawings or so. Is there content? Is it about something? Can you tell what the story is? Or can you make up your own story? I'm perfectly fine with that. I've had so many entertaining conversations where I have this whole big drawing, I put it together, I have a title, I know what it's about, and you come to me in 5 seconds and tell me this whole other thing that the drawing is about, and I go, oh my God, you're right. And I think that's a beautiful moment. I think that's okay. It's fine with me that you have your story that might contradict my story or it might support my story. So when we look at these drawings, you think in terms of what might my story be on this one? What is this about? Next thing, composition. We already looked at all those rules about composition, what we could break, what we, whatever. I try to break them a lot because A, I'm a brat, and B, a lot of times by putting things where I put them, it creates some kind of tension. And I want you to be a little tense when you look at one of my drawings. I don't do pretty drawings. They may look pretty, some of the houses especially. A lot of people go, oh, it's so pretty. It looks like Cleveland. Yes, it's pretty, but that's not why I did it. I did it because somebody built that house. Somebody lived there. How many birthdays, funerals, weddings, fights? What happened in that house? Who chose to build that house? How long did they stay there? Who moved in after that? That's what my story is about. And it's not always pretty. Things might not have been pretty inside that house. Things might not have gone well inside that house. So again, what kind of tension could I develop? Is there a sense of balance? A lot of little stuff maybe with a lot of great big stuff? Is there a lot of texture? Maybe that's the balance thing. There's a lot of little texture and bigger texture. Next thing, contrasts, value, lightness and darkness. Is there a big range of contrast or color temperature contrast or delicacy against muscle? A lot of little texture things against great big solid heavy stuff. Is that tension? Does it support the narrative? Think about it. Next thing. Abstract patterns and bones. Again, mine are all abstract drawings that happen to be realistic, that hang that wallpaper of realism on the abstraction. So think in terms of that too. It's just a bunch of patterns of abstraction, but I try to attach a story to it that's recognizable. And color palette. Is it a related color palette? Does it make sense? Is it all over the place? Is it a rainbow of 9 million colors, or is it a logical sequential arrangement of colors that makes sense together? I like this next one. Do you like it or do you hate it? And I'm okay if you hate my drawing, that's fine. But please tell me why and make them good reasons. Not just, I don't like it. Well, why don't you like it? I don't know, I just don't like it. That tells me nothing. If I'm going to have a conversation with you beyond the conversation that I'm offering you with my visual image, I need more than, I just don't like it. Why don't you like it? It could be very valid, and maybe it's something I didn't think of, and maybe it's something I should keep in mind when I do my next drawing. Next thing. How does the drawing make you feel? Does it make you happy? Does it bring back memories from your childhood or grandma's house where cookies were being baked and a special holiday was being prepared for? Or was it a difficult time where your parents were always fighting and screaming at each other? So how does it make you, how does it make you feel? How do you connect to that drawing? With the bridges, before I forget, because my head is like a metal sieve, most of the bridges, well, you saw the one example that I showed that was a racial thing. But in addition to that, my bridge drawings typically are about who built that bridge. Before that bridge existed was air. And a lot of the bridges we're looking at cross the Cuyahoga River in the Cuyahoga Valley, in the flats. There was air there. And somebody had to decide that a bridge needed to be built there. And then somebody had to design it. And somebody had to design all those parts that make the bridge go up and down. And then somebody had to get up on scaffolds and put in each rivet and use a welding thing. And the way I look at it, I always think of it in terms of the heat of Cleveland summer, when it's 85, 90 degrees and high humidity, and this poor guy usually was going up there to build this handcrafted bridge. That's what that drawing's about, any of the bridge drawings really, in addition to whatever title I might offer. It's who built that bridge. I remember clearly riding on the bus or going downtown and people say, oh, look at all the pollution coming from the steel mills, how awful. And personally, as a little kid, I used to think, how cool. Some dad is working there, they have a job. So that's who built the bridge too. Somebody had a job to build that bridge where it used to be air. Next, not the next slide, sorry. I don't know what I'm doing here. Let's see. Don't look at a drawing and think, will this look good in my dining room? You know, it might, but if you're considering buying art, can you afford it? Do you like it? Do you have room for it somewhere? That's all you need to worry about. When you get it to the place you think you might put it, living room, dining room, your office, at work, whatever, that will dictate where it will fit. So budget, how much you love it, the rest will take care of itself. So think in terms of when you look at one of my drawings, is it gonna look good in some room of mine? No, focus on the title, the content, you know, what goes into the drawing. The dining room part will take care of itself. Next thing you might consider is there a historical collection, either art history or just a regular historical connection. And finally, consider the size. Some of my drawings that you've seen in the hall are little, and some are bigger. We don't have any of the really big ones here. They're, again, 3 feet by 4 feet almost. So it's a pretty good size for a drawing. So sometimes the big drawing might have some little thing to say, and sometimes the little drawing might have some really big thing to say. So let's look at the next slide, please. Cle Series, Project Series side load, 32 by 40 inches. So again, this is very large. And this was definitely done during the pandemic. It was during our daily 5-mile forced marches during the cold, damp winter of the pandemic. And we would frequently go to a development that's near us that has these vacuous looking houses in them. And here's where I have to be careful because that's somebody's home. But where's the tension? Look at the edges. The house is pressed right up against the edge of the format. The point at the top is pressed right against the edge of the format. There's something writing along the edge of the bottom of the street. So I'm breaking all those rules, again, to make it as tense as I possibly can, because I look at this house, I get pretty tense. The technical challenge, paint 3 feet by 4 feet and get one color on and not run out of color. Did I mix enough paint for this thing? Then the next slide, please. And I want you to start thinking now. I'll point out a few things, but I want you to start thinking about the composition, the color, the title, how does it support the, whatever. Israeli series, Dishes in the Desert. Few clues. It's divided in half horizontally. Big buildings, small buildings. Divided right down the middle vertically with the tree. Right along the edge with other trees. The colors are analogous, which means they're all pretty much the same, but they're also opposite. They're a warm sort of a yellow ochre against a blue, which is kind of an opposite color on the color wheel. My challenge was to do those little buildings on the hill in the background, and it's not my typical color palette. The one thing to amuse myself, those TV dishes everywhere. Next slide, please. SFO, San Francisco series, hill with 2 cars, 29 by 22 inches. Again, think about a few things. How do you react to this? What compositional rules am I breaking? What am I doing with color? Don't put anything in the corner, especially the right corner. So I kind of broke half a rule by putting it in the left corner, those 2 cars. But that works because it looks like they could go flying down that hill at any moment. So they don't mentally stay in your mind in that corner. They kind of move from the corner. I put a post along the left edge. And the thing that was a difficult challenge, the fire escape. The thing that I wanted to do to amuse myself, the fire escape, including the cast shadows. Next slide, please. This is a pivotal drawing. I shouldn't say that. I should let you think it through first. The title is the Cle Series Arrangement of Blues with Track, 32 by 40 inches, so it's very large. This is a pivotal one in terms of, I had been doing a few large drawings, but I had in my mind that I wanted to do large drawings that were pretty vacant, like the first one we looked at, the big house, that was not much happening. So I thought it would work, and like I said, this is the first one I did like that, and I think it's one of the best drawings I've ever, I really love this drawing. And look at the compositional things that I did wrong. There's a plane of shape across the top, and again across the bottom, a pole along the right. But look at that little sliver that you can see around the corner of the pole. You see the building continue. So there's this air breathing in, so I got you there. The thing that would amuse me, those cast shadows from those little projections. How could you pass that up? Next slide, please. Cle Series Monumental Momentum, again, about 3 feet by 4 feet. Think it through a little bit, come up with some of your own ideas. And here's a bridge in the flats, fairly new. A lot of people say it's ugly. I think it's gorgeous. To build a bridge these days, to make it aesthetic, this bridge to me is a gazelle or an impala or an animal leaping across the whole Cuyahoga Valley in flight. And it curves, a huge, heavy bridge, and it's graceful, and it's modern, and I built it now. It just flies across the Cuyahoga Valley. So I wanted to see if I could get that momentum, that movement, that sense of rhythm in this rigid iron, steel, riveted, handcrafted bridge. Compositionally, along the left, along the right. In addition to that, I've got 2 things going to the 2 top corners, that one post going right to the corner, and the steel beam going right to the corner. You really shouldn't do that. But what camouflages that is that motion. And the little thing I wanted to do that would amuse myself, that little green sign. Look at that little green sign. How could you not do that little green sign? Next slide, please. CLE Series August, 32 by 40. And again, hot bridge. Somebody built that in the summer heat. Compositionally, diagonal both directions. Bad boy. Next slide, please. CLE Series behind, same DA with stacks, 32 by 40, so again, it's about 3 feet by 4 feet. And something along the bottom edge, something along the right, something along the left. Somebody lives, or at least spends a lot of their life, in that Italianate building behind the billboard. I think that's significant. Somebody's life is spent there. The thing that amuses me, well, why I wanted to do it was for the complexity of the stuff that holds up the sign. But I wanted to do the blue against the blue against the blue. There's those 3 different blues there. And the thing that amused me, same da. I think it really says same day something or other, but I decided to crop it at da because it just is fun. Next slide, please. And we'll just breeze through these last ones. 3 feet by 4 feet, CLE Series, Trestle lift. And I will point out, the main reason I wanted to do it, the rust stains on the concrete at the bottom. Next slide, please. CLE Series Afternoon Up and In, 22 by 29, so it's a little smaller. Diagonal going all the way through it again for rhythm. Something along the right edge, the steel and the sky. But I break it up with all those little diagonal or crisscrossy things everywhere, so it camouflages that tension that you feel, but you're not quite sure why. Reason why I wanted to do it, see that little tiny sliver of sky up there in that little rectangle thing? I want to do this whole bridge so I can paint that little thing of sky. Next slide, please. CLE series alone and stuck in the middle, 16 by 40, so it's really long and kind of narrow vertically. This was done during Black Lives Matter. So that's the content, kind of. Is that car protecting us or them or who? We don't know. The space is weird. I took great care in getting that car to be centered. I measured it. People have asked why car 514, and that's kind of my own personal little dark humor thing. Remember car 54, where are you? I threw in the one to throw you off so that you wouldn't know that right off the bat. And 5, 1, and 4 are a lot easier to do than 3, 6, or 9, or 8, or whatever. Next slide, please. CLE series layered gardens, 16 by 40, again, really long. I measured again with a ruler the house on the left to make sure that the edge of that house divided the page right in half. And then if you look at the blue and the green house, they divide the next section in half. I have the tree and the pole along the edge. Again, this was done during the pandemic, so it was all that tension was in there. I was trying to convey that tension. And the other thing with all these house drawings, the doors and windows, I think it, and a lot of people have suggested to me that, what goes on behind that window? What's inside that door? If I were to open that door, what's in there? And I isn't that fun to think what's going on in those houses? Next slide, please. And you'll all be relieved this is my last one. CLE series, fences, boundaries, and neighbors. I did a lot of adjustment on this one. And I won't point out all of those things, except the most significant one is the blue house. The main reason I wanted to do this drawing was because in my original reference material, that house was a real bright acidy green, and I wanted to do that so bad. And as I developed the drawing, I thought that green is not going to work in here. It's just not going to be believable. What else could I put in there that would be as shocking and weird, but still kind of go with the drawing a little bit better? And I came up with blue. And the cool thing that happened because of that was that blue house now looks like a mask or somebody watching us. It looks like a face. That whole blue house looks like a face. And then the yellow house is another one. It's right in the middle, sort of staring at us. And the other reason I really wanted to do this one was that little bump out on the greenhouse with that diagonal cast shadow. That's why I wanted to do this whole drawing. Now, the fun thing about this drawing, just this morning, we found out that it's going to go with 2 other drawings to become part of a permanent collection in a museum in another state. I can't tell you more than that because I haven't signed off papers or anything, but they gave us the final decision this morning that they're taking this one. So thank you very much for your attention, and I guess we're going to open up to questions, and I don't know where you want me or how we're going to do this. So.
Yes. Thank you so much. You can stay right here.
Okay.
I'm gonna, that was wonderful. And I hope and I think that, everyone that looks at Tom's drawings will look at them a little bit differently. I've heard Tom a couple times talk about his work, and you just really look at the work differently. I can stand in front of your drawings and meditate on it and really find all of those meanings, and those are like the secrets. We heard the secrets that are in these works by you, so thank you so much.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the thing about secrets, because at least one of the drawings in the LGBT Center is about secrets, as you know.
Yes.
When you came to the studio to curate, you asked me about that drawing, and it's called Little Houses, Little Cubes, Little Boxes, something like that. And it's about 6 or 8 houses lined up in a suburban setting, and they're like monopoly houses, basically, and they're void of any sense of life or rhythm or anything. Yeah. And in the foreground is a bundle of utility equipment, like a telephone thing and a cable TV thing, and it's just bunched. And I swear, the guys who install that stuff install them so that they're all at different angles to drive everybody who's OCD out of their minds, because you want to straighten them up, right? Anyway, the bundle in the foreground of those utility things is reminiscent to me of a graveyard for the AIDS patients, AIDS victims that we have lost through the years. And the buildings represent, they're like almost an ice cube tray. And they sort of represent the LGBT community who's trapped in their own little cubicle of an ice cube tray. And they're afraid to tell anybody that they're gay. They're afraid what the response will be. And they feel like they're contained and locked within that space. So thank you for bringing that one up.
Yes, thank you. So just because of time, is there any questions here at Judson? We're going to open up for some questions for Tom.
Oh, and Kelly, would you mind stopping the screen share, and we'll see a full view of Tom on out here in Zoom land. Thank you so much. Perfect.
All right, so does anybody here at Judson have a question for Tom?
I don't so much have a question as a comment. When I look at your work, Tom, the first thing that gets me is the technical mastery and the complexity of the drawings. I mean, they're just mind-blowing. The other thing is, especially when you do houses, there's and I mean this is a compliment, there is a story you're trying to figure out. It's almost a David Lynch kind of Twin Peaks thing, like there's something sinister going on in there. But I think it really forces the viewer to say, what can I see? And I love that about your work, and the bridges and the Cleveland series are just incredible. I don't know how you have eyesight left. I really don't, because the work is so exacting.
Well, thank you. I did have 2 cataract surgeries. That helped a lot. And it also affected my color palette. I see blue now in a way that I never saw blue before. So I don't know why. I think the lens they put in somehow had some kind of correction. Okay. Like this. Okay. Sorry, I keep cutting out. I'm not good with mechanical devices. Like I said, I only know how to sharpen a pencil. But, you know, people have asked, how long does each one take? And I'd like to say flippantly, as long as it takes to get it done. Or it depends on what size brush I use. But the true answer is I have no idea how long they take. If you really want to know, go to my blog. And there's a daily journal on the development of each drawing, and that will show you how, pretty much, sometimes I skip a day and jump ahead a little bit, but pretty much that indicates how much time I spend on each drawing. Do the math. I go in 3 to 5 hours every day, usually 5 days a week, and until I'm done. And when I'm finished with a drawing and I sign it, it's done. And it took as long as it took. I compare it to if you're in Parma building a ranch house that's a brick ranch, you had to put each brick in place, one brick after another after another. Did you count that? You know, when you're done, the house is done. The bricks are all in place. You're done.
We have
Meg, you have
question.
a question?
Tom, do you do one thing at a time? Do you start something and finish it, or do you have a couple of things working at the same time?
That's a good question. It's the one thing I miss about painting on canvas. When I was on canvas, I could put it on the easel, take it off the easel, put another one on, and so on. These drawings are mounted onto the drawing board with tape all the way around, and it takes a lot of tape, and that's expensive to remove it and put it back on, and to get it square on the drawing board. I wish I could work a little here, put it aside, work on the next one, put it aside, work on the next one, put it aside. If for no other reason, if I mix up a batch of color that's going to work in this one, it might work somewhere else on that one. And I'm so cheap, I don't want to throw any paint away. So if I can save some color, I would do that. I learned, and especially lately, that I'm older, and one of my goals is to not be so precise and care so much about each element of the drawing. I learned in color comp with Joseph McCullough at the Cleveland Institute of Art, Joseph McCullough, not McCullough, that if you have this color surrounded by another color, when you put this color somewhere else surrounded by a different color, it appears to change its color. So I found out that I can cheat and save a color and use it somewhere else, or tweak it slightly and use it somewhere else. But yes, I wish I could work on more than one piece at a time.
piece of art you work out in your studio and another one that's
Now, I do have a nice studio at home. The question was if I can work in both studios. The studio at home we call the small work studio, and it's for doing handcrafted children's books or special little projects. But typically, I would not work on a big piece at home anymore, as opposed, and have another big piece at the TreeHouse Studio. It just seems a little schizophrenic for me because they're 5 minutes drive in between, and that would be challenging, I think.
Okay, I think there is more questions online, so I'm gonna turn it over to Megan.
Yes, we got actually a bunch. So Tom, thank you. That was so cool. I love the ominous subtext of suburbia just kind of lurking beneath everything. It's delightful. So we have one was actually one of the questions that was asked today was by Coleman, and actually you got it. Somebody wanted to know how long it takes you to do a drawing. So apparently you're really used to this.
That question comes up an awful lot, and really, like I said, I just start, I keep working, and when I feel it's finished, it's finished. So if it took 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 2 weeks, it doesn't matter. And sometimes oftentimes we'll do a drawing and think about doing a drawing and think, no one's ever gonna want this drawing. No one's ever gonna buy it. No museum is ever gonna want it. And then the brat in me says, you know what, I don't care, because I wanna do this drawing. And if it takes 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, I don't care. I'm gonna use a piece of paper anyway. I have to draw every day anyway. So I might as well entertain myself and do something I wanna do. And interestingly, as you would expect, a lot of those that I don't care what anybody thinks, it's one of the first ones a museum will take. So
there you go, because you're doing it for you.
Exactly.
My point.
No other, the way it is.
Yeah. So speaking of allocating time, I have another question from actually Karen Aturvik McGuire is on the call today. Hi, Karen. And she wanted to know, hi, Tom, can you talk about how you allocate your time? We all wish to make art all the time, but do you take time to market and schmooze, or does somebody represent you and do that for you?
My husband thinks that's hysterical.
Oh, that's legit. Oh.
Prior to the pandemic, my day would be go to the gym first, try to get there as early as possible by 7-ish, do an hour of aerobics and then a mile in the pool. While I'm doing that, I'm thinking, what am I going to do when I get to the studio? What color should I mix first? What do I have to check? Getting back to photographing. I photograph every day for the blog. When I get home in the evening after dinner, I'm relaxing, I'm reading a book or whatever, and I go, I'm going to look at my drawing just to see how it feels right now. And I say, oh, that's got to be fixed. First thing tomorrow morning, that's going to be fixed, whatever thing it is. So anyway, the day starts at the gym in the pool. Pandemic? No, that's not happening. I'm not going to that gym. Anyway, I now, instead of going to the gym first thing, go straight to the studio. And the joke at home is an artist is always working. An artist is always seeing. An artist is always thinking, how could I turn that into a drawing for me? So that's part of the time frame. It never shuts off. One of my cousins would call at the studio and she said, am I interrupting the muse? I said, what are you talking about, the muse? It's 9 o'clock, I go into work. It's noon or 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. I have something to do, I leave work. That's the muse, it's work. You go, you work, you do, you go home. It's as simple as that. My mind is wandering. I think part of the other question was who represents you. I do have the Dolan Maxwell Gallery in Philadelphia that shows my work, and the old print shop in New York City that shows my work. And a lot of times they are at the fine print fair and works on paper at the Cleveland Art Museum. This year it'll be sometime in October, and I don't have the exact date, but they will have examples of my work there probably. So that's one thing. My fabulous husband has taken upon this job of getting to know museums and not representing me, how can I put this? Developing relationships with museums until they get to know us, they get to know my work, and then the dialogue intensifies more and more until hopefully they actually select some work to be in there. So
Bill's doing a lot of this networking too. Nice.
Somebody else do the mechanics that aren't the art things. You're a business owner when you're an artist, and you have to be organized. You have to meet deadlines. You have to get things where they're going to be when they're promised to be there. You have to have all your paperwork look like, I had a job interview once, and somebody said, "You never even get that job." And I said, "Yes, I will. They'll give me an offer." And they said, how are you so sure?" And I said, "Because I'm going to show up with a tie on, I'm going to be on time, and I'm going to speak English when they ask questions." And when I came back, I said, "I got the offer." They said, "How is that possible?" I said, "I wore a tie and I spoke English. I showed up on time. That's what you do." So I don't know if that answered all the questions.
It gave away. It's like that networking, and the connections and the persistence, and that really pays off. And just to
And the other thing too is if you have this thing here that you're trying to do and you're going toward that thing, oftentimes there are a lot of steps in the way or along the way. Maybe you don't even have that thing in mind. You do each of these steps that are appropriate. You go to the right school. You practice your profession. It helps to be a teacher. Teaching for 32 years made me an artist, because I had in my mind, when I'm working in my studio, I have to come up with, why am I doing this? What's the first step? What's the second step? How do I fix a problem? And so on. I had to show all of that to a student. I mean, you have to project to a student, this is what we're going to do. How do we do it? How do you sharpen your pencil? How do you apply paint? What paintbrush do you use? All those minute, I had to teach them how to use the sink and one paper towel. So all of that is part of the repertoire that's in my practice in my studio. So each of those little steps, until we do meet that curator at the museum, all those steps were in place, even though you may not have actually planned those steps to be in place.
right, all the bricks make the house. So
That's right, you got it.
all the bricks make the house. So we also have, speaking of bricks, so speaking of bricks, it said, this one's from Andrew Leach, who's a fellow CONVERGE exhibiting artist. Hi, Andrew. This is, you draw buildings. Andrew says, you draw buildings and structures, and it shows that you love the built environment. Did you ever ponder that you would have been a great architect? By the way, fun fact, Andrew is in fact involved in architecture. Oh, did you ever ponder being an architect?
Yes.
Yes.
I took architecture in high school. I loved it. I drove my teacher insane because I said, "What do you want me to do next?" Because I'd have all the plans drawn for my house. He said, "Well, build a model." "Oh, okay." Monday comes, "Here's the model." "Oh my God." I said, "What do I do next?" He said, "Render it." So I'd go home and paint it the next day. "Here's a rendering of the house." "Oh no." So I loved being an architect. What I hated was there was math involved. And my moment in high school, when I was designing a house that had this funny structural thing, and I thought, you probably should support that somehow. And I don't know, I'll just throw a beam in, what do I care? I'm in high school, so I can say something like that, but I thought, when I'm an adult and I'm a real architect, and I just throw in a beam somewhere, that's not going to work. So there was creativity in architecture, but there was an awful lot of physical specifics and math. And that to me was way too confining and outside of my wheelhouse. You give me 2 and 2 to add together, and I think it might be 4. So that's why I'm not an architect.
Fair enough. Now, so this is speaking of architecture and bridges. This question is from Marty Higgins, and it says, how do you get to the vantage points to take the photographs, such as with the bridges?
Well, since the pandemic, I don't even print out photographs anymore, because I was going to Costco and print out photographs there, and I'm not walking into Costco during a pandemic to print out photographs. So I started taking my iPad to work, and I'm working off my iPad trying to come up with vanishing points. I found one today on my drawing board on the drawing I'm working on today, just as I was cleaning up, and I got peripherally, I saw my vantage point that was penciled on the drawing board, and I thought for sure it was a tarantula, and I went, "Ah!" And I realized it was just my pencil drawing for the perspective point. And I said, just calm down, Tom. Just calm, it's only a pencil. It's not gonna hurt you. I taught my high school kids what I called angle transfer. It's a form of what's in the book, right side of the brain, left side, whatever. You can measure every angle in front of you and bring it to your paper. I'm not going to get into that now because there's a whole lot of stuff to do. But I came up with that on my own personally, really, because I had 9th graders who didn't want to be in my classroom. and 10th graders sometimes, and whatever. They had to have a humanities credit. And you could tell the kids who were, okay, I want to take art, and you could tell the kids, I do not want to be here. And you're not going to make me want to be here. So I had to come up with a way to teach them perspective. You know, we all did that thing in junior high with a ruler and a vanishing point, and it was usually one road going down the thing, and you'd have a row of buildings on each side, and they were always two-story. They had one door on the first floor and one window on the second floor. Have you ever seen a building that has one door and one window? There's not even enough room in there to have a set of stairs to go to the second floor. And junior high kids are doing these god-awful drawings of that. I thought, I can't have my kids do that. So I taught them how to transfer angles and shapes and things from here and bring it down to here. There's a set of rules. They took notes on it, and it takes a lot of practice. Some kids get it like right away, and some kids take a little longer. But I had knuckle-dragging, unpleasant people who needed to be there, who had to pass the class, and I had to make it pleasant for them and for me. So I had, again, I do not kid, the first day, the first lesson, how to sharpen a soft pencil. Second lesson, how to use the sink, soap, and a paper towel. And it was broken down that small. So every project had a built-in, almost guaranteeable success. And yet they had to do critical thinking, and they had to solve all their problems. I did not solve any of their problems. Now, what do I do next? What do I do next? I don't know. Don't make me tell you what to do next, because you're not going to like it, and then it's my fault. So you have to decide what to do next. And I gave them the tools, how to make those decisions. We did critiques. What else? It's something else I was going to say. They call a lot of the kids lovingly called it art boot camp. I loved it. I thought that was great, because they felt that they had to learn little stuff to get to the big thing, and they could see why that worked. Because the first day I said, if you follow all my directions, by the end of this week, we will have drawn a box in 3 dimensions in space, and possibly, if we have enough time, a second box next to it relating to it properly. I promise you that will happen by Friday. So that proves to you that I'm not going to lie to you. So by Friday, they had a box, and we put them all up on the wall, and they go, oh my God, I drew a box, and it's in perspective, and it looks believable and real. I said, see, I told you. Now you're going to listen to everything else I'm going to tell you the rest of the year? So,
It's actually perfect, because I have a comment from one of your former students.
Oh no!
And a question and answer. Yes, no, it's perfect. It's perfect.
Is it the one that always says, you made me hate art?
No, in fact, it's the opposite.
Okay.
That. So it's from Julia Knippis. Forgive me if
I love Julia.
So Julia says, as one of his former high school students over 30 years ago, I still use the tools Tom taught us that he speaks of now. I have no question, but I'd like to say that you look almost exactly the same. He is ageless. That is a real comment. And then also, she said, yes, angle transfers. So yes, you're ageless, Tom. Basket. Then Julia also says angle transfers, which you just mentioned, was precisely what she still uses, and that she wanted me, and then we'll close up after that, was that I'm supposed to remind you about having your gallery shows, says Julia.
Having my what?
It says, remind him about having our gallery shows.
Oh, yeah. We had a small entrance to the classroom that was bulletin board space. And the 11th and 12th graders were assigned at the beginning of the year in pairs. So each one was assigned a week. And they knew what the dates of the opening of their show and the closing of their show. They were responsible for choosing anything and putting it up in any way they wanted and bringing in any props, as long as it wasn't something obscene or that would get us all into trouble. And I explained that to them. I said, I don't care, but I don't want that administrator coming in and saying, well, you can't have that picture on the wall because it's obscene. So please, use good judgment so that I don't have to have that fight. Anyway, they had this space. They could put it up any way they wanted. They needed to decide on a theme. They had to design and print out invitations. They had to definitely invite their counselor and any of their classroom teachers and any of their friends. I thought maybe every now and then we'd get one parent or so show up. But every single show we had parents, aunts, uncles, grandmothers. This is at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. People took off from work to come to their kids' art show. Is that cool? I mean, kids strung lights. Oh, they had to host an opening so they could bring in brownies or, whatever. And they could see then what went into curating a show, putting it together, having some kind of a reason why that show, a theme to hang it on, and then host the show, host the opening. That was fun. I mean, another thing that we did was everything that came in within 3 days, usually, because I tried to do things about the same size. Within 3 days, everything that came in was in a mat with a label on it and placed on display somewhere in the building. The cool thing at the beginning of the year, some kid always would say, "How come you put that up? It was awful." I said, "How come you turned it in?" Because you know what? Everything I assigned is going to go up somewhere in the building. And then, because I'm lazy, I could take a 5-minute field trip every day. Okay, kids, let's go down and see the new art show that, class, whatever period it was, did this assignment. So we trudled on down to this and we look at it for a couple minutes, and I don't have to teach, I don't have to do anything. I'm just walking around the building. And then we walk back. And I say, look at the labels. If that kid is in your math class, go up to him and say, your drawing was really cool. I really like that. And you guess what? You might get a date or something out of it.
There you go. Brilliant. Tom, thank you so much. I'm going to close with this final comment from Martha. It is from Martha Pantoni. So amazing artist supporter who's actually moderating again our panel discussion coming up on, again, that is October 7th. Did I do it right on that one? October 6th. So close. Martha says, wow, you have really shown me a different way to look at your drawings, and I won't look at anything the same way again.
Hope that's
I know, what a thing to end on. So Tom, thank you so much for
Thank you for
this
having me.
amazing talk. I'm going to throw it back to Mindy Towsley to close things off, if I'm not mistaken. Or Kelly Pontoni. Kelly, are you closing?
No, Mindy can close. I just want to thank everyone again. I actually have a couple here at Judson. I have some membership forms if anybody would like to have a membership at the Artist Archives. That's helped support our facility. And I also have the CONVERGE catalog with all the artists. So if anybody's interested, you can see me after the program.
Thank you, Kelly. That's great. Tom, thanks so much. I know you pretty well, and I still learn stuff from your talk. And I will have to say that your years as a teacher have served you well. Excellent presentation. So thanks again to Judson Manor for hosting us. And thanks to Judson Manor also for supporting the CONVERGE exhibition. Thanks again for all our sponsors and everyone who participated. It was great to see everybody on Zoom. I looked at all your names, so I know who was there. And thanks again to Judson Manor for those of you who are there in person. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Megan, and thanks, Kelly, for all your work. And we're going to say goodbye now. Thanks so much. Don't forget to come to CONVERGE at the Archives. We're open Wednesday through Friday, 10 to 4, and Saturday, 12 to 4. I will be there tomorrow and Saturday. Stop in and say hi, and do visit the other venues. You can find their times and their locations on our website. Thanks, everybody. Have a great afternoon.